The defense sector skyrocketing on earnings this week. All of big tech showing intense spending in their CapEx, which means the AI story is unfolding. And yet the one thing powering both of these booming sectors is falling by the wayside for retail investors. Joining us today to really dive into the rare earth market is Anupam Ghildyal with REalloys, and we are going to dive into so much about this whole rare earth story right now. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, I think this is such an important time for the retail investor to be paying attention to what's going on with rare earth materials, because right now, a lot of these stocks are down and they've lost interest of the retail community, but the story is fundamentally very much the same. So I'm hoping we can start out by talking about why rare earths are so closely tied to what's happening in the defense and the AI story in the market right now.
Yeah, rare earths are very, very important for any kind of economy, not just to thrive, but survive. And that is something that a lot of people do not really understand. So when you talk about defense, you cannot make a single drone, a single missile, a single aircraft carrier, an F-35, nothing without rare earths. So for example, if we don't have any rare earths and China stops supply of all rare earths, we cannot fight a war for even 2 or 3 weeks, given that how much inventory of all these missiles and everything else that we have. Then when it comes to AI, like AI and computing and all these kind of things, a lot of energy systems, even the GPUs, have rare earths in them. So nothing in this world basically runs without motors, which require magnets and rare earths, and a bunch of other devices that use a lot of rare earths and magnets in them. Is it important? Absolutely yes.
Yeah, it's so important, and yet it seems to have fallen off in importance for investors. You look at broad market across this entire rare earth sector, and most of these names that were very, very popular 6 months to a year ago, we're starting to see a loss of interest and a dwindling of their stock price. You are here as an expert in this sector to talk about fundamentally what's the story behind the scenes and what these companies are seeing as far as demand and growth. I know we recently had another analyst on talking about this sector, and one of the things that some investors may be pulling back from is just how long this process is taking and how long that growth story could be. So can you keep us updated on what is happening with the rare earth process in the US? I know there's this huge movement to mine and manufacture all of these rare earths in the US. Where are we at in that process, and how long could that timeline be?
We are behind, very, very behind. The good thing is a lot of companies are coming into play who are setting up rare earth processing capability, mining capability, metallization capability, magnet manufacturing capability. But it will take us at least 10 to 15 years. US used to produce a lot of rare earths back in the 80s and 90s. And then we decided that this is too manual of a process and too polluting. And we decided to divorce ourselves from all of this manufacturing. We actually taught China on how to do rare earth processing, and now they are processing 90% of it. They are using it as a weapon when it comes to any kind of trade negotiations or anything else. For example, when the current administration tried to impose tariffs on China, 100%, 50%, whatever that number was. The first thing that they did is they announced that they're going to stop the supply of rare earths. And that's how they bring you back to the table to any kind of negotiations. So given everything that is happening in the US, if we continue building at the same pace or even faster, in the next 10 to 15 years, we are on a path that we can be independent in terms of producing these critical rare earth materials here in the US. But as I said, this will take time. And if you think about what's happening globally, like all major economies in the world are thinking about increasing their spending on defense. Like there are rumors that we are thinking about increasing our spending by 50%. We are already at $1 trillion. So with all this extra defense spending that is happening, it is not just going towards the defense companies, but it is going towards creating that infrastructure within the countries that make us self-reliant, not just in making the end product, but also the materials that go into them. And that's just happening globally, be it in Europe, be it here in the US, be it in Korea, be it in Japan, India, everywhere.
Yeah, every single country is working to bring that security of mining and producing some of these materials in their own country so that they have that sovereignty. Like you gave that example of China is an important thing. And that's why so many investors and so many people were investing in rare earths a few months ago, because we saw the urgency. We see the importance as an economy, as a country, even as investors, that it is essential that each country has their own independence in this so that, that those negotiations mines aren't a threat, and also security. Defense and AI growth are dependent on rare earth materials. This is a critical resource and a critical process that we need to have control over. And so it makes sense. We also saw that major investment from the US government into helping to create some of this infrastructure. And I think that's what got investors really excited right away. Are you seeing in the industry some of those investments starting to pay off, or what's happening behind the scenes as far as working towards actually getting that system that's been really displaced since the 80s back and up and running in the US?
So, number one is without government support, this industry is not going to thrive in the country. And that's unfortunate, but it's true. But you require the floor pricing that the government has set up for a few companies and will be offering to a few more. You require the debt financing that is required to scale up building up this infrastructure. You require equity investment in the companies. So all these mechanisms, they have been pretty well thought out. And this is what is going to happen in Europe as well. There was a meeting of G7, and they also decided that they need to come up with all of these measures to ensure that they can produce critical materials and magnets in Europe. And as I said, without these, it will not be possible to rebuild this important industry here in the US. And why is government handout and all of these kind of incentives required? Because we are competing on an uneven or an unfair playing ground. China currently controls 90% of processing of rare earths. 97% of heavy rare earth metals are manufactured in China, and they control the pricing. So the Asian Metal Index is currently controlled completely by China. You can see the fluctuations. I'll give you an example. If a company ABC decides that they are going to set up a rare earth processing facility somewhere in Europe, immediately you can see the fluctuation in pricing in the Chinese Metal Index or Asian Metal Index, as you call it. And the prices get lowered down. So suddenly a project that was viable financially now becomes unviable financially and cannot get the debt financing it needs to start setting it up. So there are multiple measures that they're using to ensure that these kind of production continues to happen in China and they have control. And if we have to get out of their control, all the governments need to act. Unfortunately, this is not a Republican or a Democrat thing. It's a bipartisan thing. And this kind of investment is going to continue. And it is absolutely required. Like, as I said, you cannot do anything. It is not like we are talking about exotic things like this is like daily staples, that this is essential for running of any economy. Energy systems, defense systems, your fridge, your car, everything, your phone, the speaker that you're using has got rare earth magnets in it. Everything has got rare earths in there.
Yeah, it's so essential, and I think that's why we are seeing so much investment. I think for retail investors, people who in the stock market, they look at that dependency on government funding as a potential risk. But do you think that there is a risk there that that funding could go away someday, or do you think there's such a critical need here that there is less of a risk that you're fairly certain that that funding will continue and maybe even grow in the future?
My opinion is funding will continue and actually will increase, because these are not funding that is given like, okay, we believe you completely take the money. These are all milestone based funding. Like all these companies that are getting money, they have to hit a certain milestone, then you unlock a portion of the money. Then the second milestone, you unlock a portion of the money. And that's how it should be. Money should be available, but money should only be allocated or actually given out to companies once they are making considerable progress and meeting all their milestones. And in our case, right, like unlike most of the companies in this space in North America who have a lot of announcements about doing great things, we are actually going to start producing materials for qualification this year. And we are going to start early production next year. So we are not a company that is saying that give us the money, wait for 5 years, and we will give you a return. We are a company that is getting into production or starting production this year. So that makes us fundamentally different. And we are also knocking on quite a few doors. And we are pretty confident that we should be able to get some level of support from the government.
Rare earth materials, we so often talk about the miners, those who are actually capturing the natural product and have to build mining operations. But that's not what REalloys is doing. You guys are processing and manufacturing the magnets that are used in so many of these different scenarios that you just talked about. How unique is that in the US? It doesn't seem like there's a big market for that already. So how much does your company stand out in the US as far as how far ahead you are on that process by actually starting to produce things this year already?
So in my opinion, we are the most standout company there is in this space. First of all, like we do own a mine. We have our own mine in Canada, which is one of the top 3 heavy rare earth mines in Canada. So we own it, but we've not started the development of it because our understanding of the market is kind of a bit different and I believe is more real than what others are saying or claiming for their own benefit. So we could start development of the mine, but we believe capital can be more efficiently used on the processing, refining, metal making, and magnet making side. So through SRC, we already have supply agreements with two mines that are producing and supplying the feedstock to us. And then REalloys also has MOUs and supply agreement with a bunch of other companies which are going into production in the next few years to support our phase two production. And I think this is also backed by a recent International Energy Agency report that came out this week that mining is not going to be the bottleneck. The processing is going to be the bottleneck. There are hundreds of mines across the globe which are in some stage of development for rare earth mining. However, the processing capability is very limited. In the US, if you think about MP Materials and USA Rare Earths, they are setting up or have processing capability, which is going to be captive to their own mines. Whereas in our case, we have set up a multi feedstock kind of processing capability that is not captive to our own mine. So we can process monazite, bastnasite, ionic clay, many different kind of rare earth chlorides or carbonates. And that gives us a flexibility to work with a variety of mines across the globe in allied nation and get the highest quality and the lowest cost feedstock. And that is where the bottleneck is. And we believe that we are currently the only one that are setting up this kind of a capability, especially focused on heavy rare earths. A lot of other companies are focused on light rare earths, but without heavy rare earths, you cannot make any of the high performance magnets that go into these critical systems. And we believe that we are the only game in town in terms of large scale production of these heavy rare earth materials.
The production piece is huge, and every investor is looking for bottlenecks in the system. And so it's interesting to hear your perspective that processing and manufacturing is going to be the bottleneck in this area. Right now, you mentioned a couple of big name companies in this space. Many of our investors are familiar with MP and USAR because of those government investments. But those stocks, really all of the stocks in the entire rare earth sector, you look at the charts, they're all in the red right now. There's a loss of interest from investors. And I want to talk a little bit about that, just speaking directly to our retail investment community. Why is now an interesting time to be looking at these names versus when they were making the headlines so often when those first initial government investments were announced and making those big headlines?
So I think for the retail investors, the number one thing I would say is the demand is insane. It is a supply constrained market today. It is going to be a supply constrained market, in our opinion, for the next 5, 10, 15 years. So, any company that can produce and supply will have a market for it. All the announced plans, if you see the magnet manufacturing plans or the separation metallization plans, they are not enough in terms of our own domestic needs. Leave aside like allied nations requirements or supply requirements to other countries. So demand is 100% there. Now it is a question of whether you believe the companies can execute and deliver and produce and supply. And that is an analysis that retail investors need to do on each and every company. But overall, what I will say is in terms of market, I don't see anything to worry about. And look at REalloys, right? Like REalloys as a company about a year ago was just a company on paper, like incorporated in Nevada, existing on paper. In 12 months, approximately 12 months, we have acquired one of the top three heavy rare earth mines in Canada. We have formed a partnership with SRC, a facility which is built over the last 5 years, costing about $250 million. And it goes into early production this year and then production next year. And we have 80% offtake from this facility. And we have right of first refusal for the remaining 20%. We are setting up our heavy rare earth metallization facility at a large scale, being the only one who's actually announced plans and is setting it up and will go into production sometime next year. We acquired PMT Critical Metals, a company in Ohio that has been working with the Department of Defense for the last several years, metallizing multiple heavy rare earths like samarium, gadolinium, yttrium, scandium, and also demonstrating magnet manufacturing. We announced recently an MOU with JS Link, a company out of Korea, which has an American arm called JS Link America, who've got expertise in making and manufacturing magnets. We listed on NASDAQ. We raised our first $50 million. Then we raised another $100 million. We secured a letter of interest from Exim for our phase two manufacturing operations for $200 million. We assembled one of the best boards in this industry. Our board is led by Steve Dumont, who's our chairman. He's the current CEO of General Motors Defense. one of the fastest growing defense companies in the world. We have General Jack Keane, who's a former four-star general of Army. He is also an advisor to President Trump on critical defense matters. On the Canadian side, we have Ambassador David McNaughton, former ambassador of Canada to the US under Trump 1, and he's now an advisor to the Canadian government. We have Brad Wall, who is a former premier and the longest running premier of Saskatchewan, the province where we have our current separations and metallization operations. And then we also have Joe Casper, who's a former chief of staff of Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and now a special government employee to the administration. And all of this in 12 months. Plus, we have secured several supply agreements and MOUs on the feedstock side. I have not seen any company move this fast. So the DNA of the company is to move as quickly as possible. We use a word called blitz scaling internally. It means getting to the desired outcome in the fastest way possible. And while doing all of this, right, like we are eliminating a lot of risks by partnering with SRC on the separation and metallization side. We are partnering with somebody who's already set up a facility, who's got 4 or 5 years of experience in processing rare earths and making oxides and metals out of it. With JS Link, we are partnering with a company that has got an operational facility, magnet manufacturing facility in Korea, and are getting into production now. So you are eliminating a lot of technical and operational risk. There is still execution risk, there is still scaling risk and commercial risk. But the two most and the biggest fundamental risks that could hold you from going into production are being eliminated to a great extent.
Thank you for diving into the details of your company. Some of the things that really stood out to me as the board of directors you have is so heavily staffed with people related to defense or running countries. And so this is truly showing how much of a national defense issue this is and how important this is to not just US leaders, but world leaders. We know Canada is making its own investments in defense. So this isn't just a US market story. This is a global market story. And I know that you said that earlier on that every country is working to do this in different ways. And you guys are touching both Canada and the US with your company and a very new company. The second thing that I thought was really stand out, and I'm glad that you brought it up, is talking about evaluating companies for their execution and whether those plans can actually work and how rapidly some of these plans are unfolding. And I think for the investing community, again, we heard from an analyst just a couple of weeks ago who said investors are worried that the timeline to profitability for the rare earth sector as a whole is going to be longer than investors are willing to wait for right now. They're waiting to get in until we actually see that path to profitability a little more clearly, a little bit more of that execution that's needed to see the actual contracts and money coming in. And so I want to hear your timeline a little bit more about how long you think that could be for the sector, but also for your company of that path towards profitability, which every investor wants to know about.
I do not know about all the other companies and their path to profitability. I can talk about myself. I think given the floor pricing being set up in the market today, any facility that is producing at scale should have cross profitability. Then there is a bunch of other factors and SG&A and all those kind of things and the investments needed. Those kind of things pile up. But just on a pure floor pricing basis, you should be profitable. So it is about starting production, like getting your production muscle up and running and doing things at scale. Anybody in the US who can set up rare earth processing capability, magnet manufacturing capability at a scale will and should be profitable.
Yeah, I want to talk about that demand a little bit of the demand for rare earth materials from these defense companies, from hyperscalers, from appliance makers who need these critical materials. Are they making that shift to sourcing those materials from US processors like yourself? Or are they still relying on many of those resources still coming from China right now?
So defense does not have a choice. January 1, 2027, there is a DFARS deadline coming up beyond which you cannot use any Chinese origin material in any of the defense systems. And President Trump actually came out with an executive order on July 20th, reminding everybody of that. There's an announcement from White House every month to remind every single defense company that don't knock our doors on January 1st, 2027 and say that, hey, we need another waiver. That's not going to happen this time. So defense does not have an option. Then there is a lot of new demand being created, right? Where the supply is not already spoken for. If you believe in the humanoid story, which I do, humanoids are between 3 to 5 kgs of magnets or rare earths in each one of them. Then you talk about drones. Drones have a few hundred grams, tens to 100 grams of rare earths in them. So those kind of supply chains have not already been established. And then we are talking to a lot of companies, be it in the automotive sector and other areas, industrial motor manufacturers who require domestically manufactured rare earths and magnets. The thing is, right, like we are producing nothing today. Like MP Materials is in production, few other people are doing some smaller scale production, but it's nothing. It's not even 5% or 2% of what we need.
Yeah, it's still very, very early, and that January 1 timeline is quickly approaching. I'm curious to see, do you think that that will create a big bottleneck and a huge increase in demand for processors like you and the other companies that are actually processing? Again, what you said is a small percentage of what we actually need and use. Will we see some ramifications from that January 1 deadline coming up in just a few months?
We're already seeing it. Like there are so many companies knocking our doors right now. If we were in production today, we could sell everything that we were producing. And actually, the North American demand is so high. Like there is the Asian Metal Index pricing, then there is the pricing in US and Europe, which is about 2 to 3 to 4 times higher. Like for NdPr, light rare earth metals, it is about 30% higher. But if you talk about dysprosium, terbium, gadolinium, the pricing is about 3 to 4 times higher than the Asian Metal Index pricing if you can produce and sell in North America. I've seen insane numbers for these metals and oxides being sold today. So, absolutely, there is a demand for for anything that you can produce here in North America. I was thinking this is a bit speculative early on that these things could be reversed with a change in administration, but now I can see it is completely bipartisan. I know that it is not just US, but it is Europe and developing and all the developed countries trying to set up production capability internally. And if you think about it, right, like an F-35 you cannot make without magnets. But what is the value of the magnets that goes in an F-35? Is it like 10% of the cost, 1% of the cost, 0.1% of the cost, 0.01% of the cost? It is 0.01% of the cost of a $150 million aircraft. But without that, you cannot make that aircraft. So are people willing to pay double the pricing or triple the pricing for something like that? Absolutely. I don't think it makes any difference to the BOM cost of the eventual system or the product.
Such an interesting conversation today, and so many insights on where this industry is heading. I think those timelines and the dates that you mentioned are critical for investors to pay attention to, because this entire rare earth market could absolutely be changing with that January 1 deadline that's coming in just a few months. I think when more of these processors get online and that demand is being able to be filled, I think the story could turn around. This is a great time to be talking about rare earth materials, and a great time for investors to pay attention to this sector. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing more insights about what's happening in the industry. If you want to learn more about rare earths, we have talked about them a few times recently on the show. Check out this most recent interview we did talking about the rare earth industry and why now is a good time for investors to be looking at this sector.